another thing that I think is really relevant and I'd love to talk about when we talk about research is people criticize funding. And there's really two big groups as I see it. And, of course, would love your input. There's private funding, for example, a white label study. Someone is paid to prove something, or maybe you're paid to hopefully find an answer, right? So that would be maybe a private funding source like a device or a supplement.
Right.
And then you have big industry, or USDA beef checkoff money where they put some of their money towards research. And it is very clearly defined. The outcomes are not destined. It's not that they're looking for an answer. It's money that goes to high quality scientists to be able to further science. Care to comment on that?
Yeah, the funding in nutrition is kind of a double-edged sword. Long ago, the federal government, NIH, uh, basically decided that they would do fundamental disease work, and nutrition is not considered disease work, it's considered application. And so NIH, our federal government, said that the industry had to participate in the funding. And so it's sort of that catch 22. If the government says you have to fund it, and yet if you turn around and fund it, you're accused of being biased. So that's kind of a background you need to understand. Then, if you look at the industry funding, it takes two specific forms. In the commodity area, like uh, beef and eggs and dairy, um, basically there's no middlemen. So it's basically farmers who are contributing money to the USDA, and then the USDA controls the funding.
Right.
Where in something like Kellogg's or Coca-Cola or Frito-Lay's, these are industries that fund themselves. And so in one case, you've got the USDA oversight, which carefully controls how the grants are awarded and what kind of things come out of it to prevent bias. And in another case, what you have is a profit-oriented industry that really has no governing body overseeing it. So then you're stuck with just the peer review. And the peer review is kind of a saving grace to both of those. And my rule of thumb is when I see some kind of a publication, I never believe it until I see it from two other independent laboratories. So, if you're worried about a bias, just simply don't believe it. If it comes out of my laboratory or anyone else, just choose not to believe it until you see it from two independent laboratories.
It is. I love that you said that. I'm going to highlight a couple things. So, and I feel really passionately about this because, of course, I've been on the other end of the spectrum. So, I did a fellowship in geriatrics where I sit at the bedside of hundreds of dying people, right? They are at the end of their life. They have aged horribly, and largely the diseases that we're dealing with are preventable. So I'm in this to win it for people. And that is really my core fundamental driving value. When I look at the laboratories where I get my information, well, I guess, Don, you would count as a laboratory, but you have other expert researchers. You have Luke Ben Loon's lab, or Doug Patton Jones, or Stu Phillips, or Bob Wolf. These are high class researchers, high quality individuals, and I hate to throw stones, but then you've got groups at Harvard and, just these groups that are kind of like their own echo chamber that are not doing randomized controlled trials, and they're just doing these epidemiological data studies or observational data, and they're confusing the public. They're like the tiny little mouse with a microphone. And if you guys don't understand that you have to vet your source, you have to know where you're getting it and the quality of the research and the integrity of the individual, then if you don't vet at the core, you're never going to move forward. You're never going to have the information you need to protect yourself and your family. So, I know I got all hot and bothered in that
Yeah.
segment, but
But I think it's true, and I think
true.
the average person gets bombarded with these things, and I think you really have to look for some individuals you'll trust. You know, I mean, you and I try to read original research. I don't rely on anybody else's opinion. I go and read the research and form my own opinion. What was it designed correctly? Did they conduct the methods correctly? Did they interpret the data correctly? Are the conclusions in line with it? So I make my own decisions. And the last thing I do is pay attention to something that's in a headline somewhere.
Right, right. Which is why you sent me to Wash U because I believed that. There was a period of time in my career where I believed everything. And I think that, unless you become skilled at reading research and learning how to look and differentiate from, fact from fiction and know that even if a person is a physician, it doesn't mean that they're good at understanding the data and it doesn't mean that they're good at nutrition. It simply doesn't. Um,
Yeah,
so
we're in a time now where unfortunately people are going to have to learn to screen their sources of information. You can't rely, whether it comes from the New York Times or whether it comes from the internet in some way, you can't rely on it being true. And you Google search something, it might be, and it might be totally false. And so you need to learn how to use independent sources, and you need to find some people. And I hope that's one of the things that you and I can provide people is a resource where they can go and get sound information that hopefully they'll view as reliable. And we're not vested in any particular outcome, we just want the right science.
that's absolutely true. So if you guys liked this video, please subscribe to the channel, like it, share it, and listen. We have very exciting things coming for you. We're working very hard behind the scenes, putting together a membership for you. I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag a little bit early, but it's just something that I want you guys to think about. We are going to be putting together a ton of content for you and a ton of information that you can trust.